Picture this. You think you know who owns the Chicago Bears. Everyone knows it's the McCaskey family, right? Virginia McCaskey was the sweet, grandmotherly owner who inherited the team from Papa Bear George Halas himself. But here's what most people don't realize. For over 35 years, there's been a billionaire insurance mogul quietly holding nearly 20% of America's most iconic football franchise. And after Virginia McCaskey's death this past February at age 102, Patrick Ryan isn't just a minority owner anymore. He's become the potential kingmaker in one of the most valuable sports franchises on earth. When Ryan walks into Halas Hall these days, he's not just visiting. Sources say he's spending serious time there for months. And the word around Chicago's business circles is that the 87-year-old founder of Aon Corporation might be about to become the most powerful man in Bears football. But how did an insurance salesman who started by hawking policies at a Ford dealership end up controlling the destiny of the team that George Halas built for $100 in 1920? This is the story of the most important Bears transaction you've probably never heard of, and why it might determine whether the Bears ever win another Super Bowl. The crisis that changed everything. Let's rewind to 1987. The Chicago Bears had just come off their legendary 1985 Super Bowl season, and the franchise should have been on top of the world. Instead, they were facing a financial crisis that threatened the very existence of the team as we know it. Here's what happened. When Papa Bear George Halas died in 1983, he had carefully structured his estate to pass control to his daughter Virginia McCaskey. But there was a problem. His son, George Muggs Halas Jr., who had been the heir apparent until his sudden death from a heart attack in 1979, had two children who inherited significant stakes in the team. Christine and Stephen Halas owned nearly 20% of the franchise, and they were about to blow up everything. The family feud that followed was absolutely brutal. Stephen Halas didn't even consider himself part of the McCaskey family anymore. He told reporters, "I don't consider myself part of the family since my grandfather died. Not one member of the McCaskeys called to tell me or my sister that he had died. I found it out on the news." Yikes. By 1987, the estate executor wanted to sell the Halas grandchildren's shares, and guess who came knocking? Neil Blum and Judd Malkin, real estate moguls who offered $17.5 million for the 19.67% stake. These weren't just any buyers, they were developers who eventually wanted majority control of the Bears. Stephen Halas was so bitter towards the McCaskeys that he said, "I'd rather have the shares sold to an outsider than to the McCaskeys." But here's the kicker. Under NFL rules, the McCaskeys family had the right of first refusal. They could match any offer and keep the shares in the family. The problem? They didn't have the $17.5 million lying around. Michael McCaskey, who was the team president at the time, called the purchase a terrific financial burden. Think about it this way. Imagine your family owns a Ferrari, but to keep it in the family, you suddenly need to come up with the cash to buy out your cousins who want to sell it to some strangers. You love that Ferrari, but you're house rich and cash poor. That was exactly the McCaskey situation. They owned one of the most valuable sports franchises in America, but they couldn't liquefy that value without selling pieces of the very thing they were trying to protect. So the McCaskeys made a fateful decision. They matched to the $17.5 million offer to keep the shares away from outside buyers. But then they immediately turned around and sold that same 19.67% stake to two Chicago businessmen for what reports suggest was a similar amount. The buyers, insurance magnate Patrick Ryan and McDonald's chairman Andrew McKenna. Who is Patrick Ryan? Patrick Ryan's story reads like a Horatio Alger novel, and that's fitting since he literally won the Horatio Alger Award in 1987. The guy started with absolutely nothing and built one of the most powerful insurance empires in the world. Ryan grew up as the son of an Irish-American father who ran a Ford dealership in suburban Milwaukee. During summers, young Patrick shoveled concrete to help build Milwaukee's freeway system. Picture this, future billionaire in work boots and a hard hat, literally building the infrastructure that would carry him to fortune. After graduating from Northwestern University in 1959 with degrees in finance and literature, an interesting combination that probably explains his ability to both crunch numbers and tell a good story, Ryan immediately joined Penn Mutual's Chicago office as a life insurance agent. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't some silver spoon start. This was a guy cold calling prospects and knocking on doors. In 1962, Ryan had what you might call his first entrepreneurial breakthrough. He convinced Dick Fensel Chevrolet in suburban Chicago to let him create the first finance and insurance department. He would sell insurance products on behalf of Continental Casualty Company right there in the showroom. This move permanently changed how car dealerships work, according to industry historians. Think about it. Every time you buy a car today, they try to sell you extended warranties and financing. That's Patrick Ryan's legacy. But Ryan wasn't satisfied selling other people's products. In 1964, he founded Pat Ryan and Associates, his own brokerage and underwriting agency. He took the company public in 1971 with $25 million in annual sales. Through a series of brilliant acquisitions, Globe Life in 1976 and James S. Kemper Agencies in 1981, Ryan kept building his empire. The masterstroke came in 1982 when Ryan Insurance Group merged with Combined International to create what would become Aon Corporation. By the time Ryan retired as chairman and CEO in 2008, Aon had more than 500 offices in 120 countries and generated over $7 billion in revenue. Today, he's worth an estimated $12.6 billion according to Bloomberg. But here's what makes Ryan uniquely Chicago. This isn't some Wall Street financier who treats the Bears like a balance sheet entry. Ryan had been Northwestern University's biggest benefactor for decades. Both Walsh Ryan Arena and Ryan Field bear his name. He was chairman and CEO of Chicago's 2016 Olympic Bid Committee. His name is everywhere in Chicago because his money has touched everything from the Art Institute to children's hospitals. When Ryan bought into the Bears in 1990, he wasn't just making an investment, he was buying into the civic fabric of Chicago itself. The 1990 deal that nobody talks about. The 1990 sale of Bears stock to Ryan and McKenna was announced with surprisingly little fanfare for such a massive transaction. The Bears simply issued a statement saying they were selling approximately 20% of the franchise to Chicago area businessmen Andrew McKenna and Patrick Ryan. But buried in that simple announcement was one of the most important business decisions in NFL history. Here's what the Bears admitted publicly. They were set back financially when they bought the Hallis Grandchildren shares 2 years earlier. Michael McCaskey, appearing on WTTW-TV's Chicago Tonight, confirmed that the sale to Ryan and McKenna was directly traceable to that financial burden. But there was more to it than just the cash flow. The timing tells the story. This was 1990, right when NFL franchises were starting to explode in value, and right when stadium issues were becoming critical. The Bears needed partners who could think big about the future, not just solve an immediate cash crunch. Ryan and McKenna weren't passive investors. McKenna was already a Bears director and had served as board chairman for McDonald's, the Cubs, the White Sox, and Notre Dame. Ryan brought global business expertise and serious capital firepower. Together, they represented something that the McCaskies desperately needed: sophisticated business minds who could help navigate the rapidly changing NFL landscape. The deal also included some fascinating fine print that most people don't know about. Ryan and McKenna secured something called right of first refusal, meaning if any McCaskey family members ever wanted to sell the shares, Ryan Group gets the first opportunity to buy them. They also got representation on the team's board of directors, giving them real input into major decisions. Think about what this means. For 35 years, Patrick Ryan has had a front row seat to every major Bears decision. New coaches, stadium plans, player contracts, business strategies. Ryan has been in the room where it happens, and now, with Virginia McCaskey's death creating the biggest ownership transition in Bears history, those rights of first refusal might be worth more than anyone imagined. The Andrew McKenna factor. We can't tell Ryan's story without understanding his partner in this deal, Andrew McKenna Sr., who passed away in 2023 at age 93. If Patrick Ryan was the money, McKenna was the ultimate Chicago insider. McKenna's nickname among his close friends was literally Mr. Chairman, because he ended up being chairman of almost everything he touched: McDonald's, Schwartz Paper Company, the Cubs, the White Sox, the University of Notre Dame. This guy collected chairmanships like other people collect baseball cards. But here's what made McKenna special in the context of the Bears. He understood Chicago sports ownership in a way that few people ever will. In the late 1970s, McKenna had spearheaded an investor group with Bill Veeck and bought the White Sox and kept them from being moved to Seattle. He knew what it meant to save a Chicago sports franchise from outside ownership. McKenna was also the guy who, with other Chicago power brokers, called when they had problems. Patrick Ryan once said, "When people were promoted or hired into prominent positions, they were told, 'Go see Andy McKenna.'" So there were just scores of people as they came into greater responsibility in the Chicago area who were directed to see Andy for guidance. Friends described McKenna as someone who worked very quietly behind the scenes, always giving others credit. He wasn't the guy seeking publicity, he was the guy making sure things got done. In the Bears context, that meant he could navigate the family politics and the city politics that come with owning Chicago's most beloved sports franchise. When McKenna died in 2023, it created the first crack in the Ryan-McKenna partnership that had been solid for over 30 years. McKenna's estate held about 2% of the Bears, a seemingly small slice, but in a franchise now valued at $8.8 billion, we're talking about roughly $175 million worth of equity. The question became, what happens to McKenna shares? Both the McCaskey family and Ryan's group had rights of first refusal. In August 2025, they announced a deal to split those shares between them. But the more interesting story is what that deal reveals about the current power dynamics. February 2025 game changer. Virginia McCaskey's death on February 6, 2025 at age 102 changed everything. For 4 decades, she had been the unquestioned owner of the Bears, controlling about 80% of the franchise through her family shares. She was the last direct link to the Papa Bear era, having attended the NFL's first indoor championship game in 1932 when she was just 9 years old. But Virginia's death triggered something that NFL watchers had been quietly anticipating for years, a massive inheritance tax crisis that could force the McCaskey family to sell pieces of the Bears whether they wanted to or not. Here's the brutal math. Virginia McCaskey's estate faces inheritance taxes that could exceed $160 million. The McCaskey family's wealth is almost entirely tied up in the Bears. They're what financial experts call asset-rich, but cash-poor. They own something worth billions, but they can't exactly write a check for $160 million in taxes without selling shares in the very thing that makes them wealthy. This is where Patrick Ryan becomes crucial. Sources say that Ryan has been spending significant time at House Hall over the past 6 months, not just as a casual board member, but as someone actively involved in solving the family's financial crisis. The most likely scenario, Ryan will buy additional Bears shares from the McCaskey family members who need cash to pay estate taxes. But here's where it gets really interesting. Ryan is 87 years old. His own age means that this isn't just about him. It's about bringing in a new generation of investors who can carry the franchise forward. Reports suggest that Ryan isn't just buying more shares himself, he's assembling what sources describe as another group of investors from outside of the family to join him in a larger ownership stake. We're talking about potentially the biggest change in Bears ownership since George Halas himself founded the team. What makes Ryan different? In an era where NFL owners are increasingly viewed as out-of-touch billionaires, think Dan Snyder in Washington or Jerry Jones's ego trips in Dallas, Patrick Ryan represents something different. He's what you might call a steward owner rather than an ego owner. Consider Ryan's track record with Northwestern University. He hasn't just donated money, he's donated nearly $500 million over the years, including a record-breaking $480 million gift in 2021. But more importantly, he's done it without slapping his name on everything or micromanaging operations. Welsh Ryan Arena and Ryan Field and the Ryan Field House bear his name because the university chose to honor him, not because he demanded naming rights. Ryan's approach to business has always been about building institutions rather than personal brands. At Aon, he grew the company from a small Chicago insurance agency to a global powerhouse, but he did it by focusing on operational excellence rather than flashy acquisitions or ego-driven expansion. This matters for the Bears because NFL franchises are increasingly viewed as civic assets rather than private playthings. When Ryan talks about the Bears, he talks about responsibility to the fans in the city. When he was involved in Chicago's 2016 Olympic bid, he took the leadership role not for personal glory, but because someone needed to coordinate the city's effort. Ryan also understands something that many NFL owners miss. Winning is good business. His investment philosophy has always been long-term value creation rather than short-term profit maximization. That's exactly what the Bears fans have been desperate for, an owner who measures success in championships rather than quarterly earnings. The stadium imperative. Here's why the Ryan ownership transition is happening at exactly the right time. The Bears are in the middle of their most important stadium decision in decades. The current Soldier Field situation is basically a joke among NFL facilities. After the controversial 2003 renovation that turned the historic venue into what some critics now call the spaceship that landed on the neoclassical building, the Bears have been stuck with one of the smallest and most operationally limited stadiums in the NFL. Current Bears president Kevin Warren, who successfully delivered a new dome stadium for the Minnesota Vikings, has made it clear that the Bears need a new facility. The team has been exploring everything from a new lakefront stadium to the Arlington Heights site that they purchased for $197 million. But here's the problem. Building an NFL stadium today costs $2 to $3 billion minimum. The McCaskey family, even with their significant Bears wealth, doesn't have that kind of liquidity. They need partners who can help finance or guarantee the massive borrowing required for such a project. Enter Patrick Ryan, who has both the personal wealth and the business relationships to make a stadium project feasible. Ryan's various companies have managed construction projects worth tens of billions of dollars. His relationships with the Chicago banks, city government, state officials could be crucial in assembling the complex financing that the modern stadium projects require. Even more importantly, Ryan understands how to work with public entities. His Olympic bid experience taught him how to navigate the political complexities of major civic projects. Building a new Bears stadium will require coordination between the team, the city, the state, and potentially multiple levels of government. Ryan has exactly the kind of civic credibility needed to pull off such a project. This isn't just about the McCaskeys needing Ryan's money, it's about needing his expertise and relationships to deliver the facility that could determine the Bears' competitiveness for the next 50 years. The private equity wildcard. Here's where the story gets really fetch. The NFL recently opened the door for private equity investment in teams, allowing up to 10% ownership by investment funds. This creates a whole new dynamic that could completely reshape how NFL franchises are financed and operated. For the McCaskey family, private equity represents both an opportunity and a threat. On one hand, selling 10% to a private equity fund could provide the immediate capital needed to pay estate taxes and invest in new facilities. On the other hand, private equity investors typically want active involvement in operations and maximum return on investment, not exactly the family-friendly, tradition-respecting approach that has defined the Bears' ownership. This is where Ryan's role becomes crucial. Sources suggest that instead of turning to private equity, the McCaskey family is putting their trust in Ryan to assemble a group of investors who share their values and long-term vision. Think of it as choosing your partner rather than letting Wall Street choose them for you. Ryan's investor group would likely include people with Chicago connections and NFL experience, the kind of partners who understand that owning the Bears means more than just financial returns. We're talking about people who want to see a change, not just the profit margins. The alternative, selling to an unknown private equity investor, could fundamentally change the character of the franchise. Private equity is notorious for cost-cutting, revenue maximization, and short-term thinking. Does that sound like the recipe for building a championship organization? Ryan represents the path that keeps the Bears feeling like the Bears while providing the capital and expertise needed to compete in the modern NFL. The next generation factor. Here's something most people don't realize. This isn't just about Patrick Ryan Sr., it's about the Ryan family's next generation, and they're bringing some serious qualifications to the table. Patrick Ryan Jr. is a Georgetown graduate with an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School and a law degree from Northwestern. He's currently a trustee of Northwestern University and a director of Penske Corporation, the $30 billion diversified transportation company. But more importantly for Bears fans, he's the founder and CEO of Incizent Labs Group, a startup studio that incubates high-growth technology companies. Translation: Ryan Jr. understands both traditional business and technological innovation that's transforming professional sports. Think about what modern NFL teams need: advanced analytics, fan engagement technology, digital media strategies, player performance monitoring. Ryan Jr. has been building companies in exactly these spaces. And then there's Brian Ryan, who has deep experience in sports technology and analytics. He previously served as Senior Vice President of Sports Solutions for Stats LLC, where he was responsible for the revolutionary SportView player tracking technology used by the NBA, NFL, and NCAA teams. Before that, he was President of North America for Catapult Sports, a global provider of sports analytics and performance products. This isn't just nepotism. These are people who understand how modern sports franchises need to operate. They know that winning in today's NFL requires more than just good coaching and talented players. It requires sophisticated data analysis, cutting-edge training methods, and technological innovation in everything from scouting to fan experience. The McCaskey family, for all their virtues, has been criticized for being too traditional in their approach to football operations. Bringing in the Ryan family's next generation could provide exactly the kind of modern expertise the Bears fans have been demanding. What this means for Bears fans. Let's get to the bottom line. What does this all mean for the long-suffering Bears faithful who just want to see their team win? First, it means the end of the "we can't afford to compete" era. The McCaskey family's limited liquidity has long been an excuse for not investing in top-tier coaches, facilities, and front office talent. With Ryan's involvement, those financial constraints disappear. We're talking about an ownership group with the resources to hire the best available coach, build state-of-the-art facilities, and make whatever investments are needed to compete for championships. Second, it means professional management is likely to get even more professional. Ryan didn't build Aon into a Fortune 500 company by accepting mediocrity. His track record suggests an ownership approach focused on hiring the best people and letting them do their jobs. Exactly what Bears fans have been begging for. Third, it probably means that the stadium situation finally gets resolved. Ryan has the combination of personal wealth, business relationships, and civic credibility needed to navigate the complex politics of building a new NFL facility in Chicago. Whether that's a new lakefront facility or more likely the whole Bears Village in Arlington Heights, Ryan has the expertise to make it happen. But perhaps most importantly, it means the Bears could finally escape the family business limitations that have held them back. Don't get me wrong, the McCaskey family's stewardship has preserved the Bears tradition and kept the team in Chicago. But running a modern NFL franchise requires more than good intentions and family loyalty. It requires capital, expertise, professional management at every level. Ryan's expanded ownership would bring all of those elements while maintaining the family's involvement and Chicago identity. It's not about replacing the McCaskeys, it's about supplementing their strengths while addressing their limitations. The broader NFL implications. The Bears' ownership situation is part of a broader challenge facing the NFL. How do you preserve family ownership in an era when franchises are worth billions and operating expenses are exploding? The traditional NFL model was built around families who bought teams decades ago for relatively modest amounts and gradually grew with the league. The McCaskeys, Rodney's in Pittsburgh and Mara's in New York, represent this legacy ownership model. But when franchises are worth $6 to $8 billion and new stadiums cost $3 billion, family ownership becomes financially impossible without outside partners. The Ryan solution represents one possible model, bringing in wealthy, committed partners who share the family's values and long-term vision. It's different from the private equity approach that threatens to turn NFL teams into generic financial assets. Other NFL teams are watching the Bears situation closely because they face similar challenges. How do you maintain control while accessing the capital needed to compete? How do you preserve tradition while embracing innovation? How do you stay true to your fan base while operating a global entertainment business? Ryan's approach suggests that the answer isn't choosing between family ownership and professional management, it's finding partners who complement family ownership with additional resources and expertise. Risks and challenges. Let's be honest, this transition isn't without its risk. Adding new ownership partners always creates the potential for conflict, especially when you're dealing with a family that has controlled the franchise for over 60 years. The biggest risk is probably generational differences within the McCaskey family itself. Virginia McCaskey had 11 children, 21 grandchildren, 40 great-grandchildren, and 4 great-great-grandchildren. That's a lot of people with opinions about how the team should be run, and not all of them are going to agree about selling shares to Ryan or anyone else. Some family members might prefer the private equity route, which could provide maximum immediate cash with minimum ongoing involvement. Others might want to maintain more control, even if it means accepting financial limitations. Managing these internal family dynamics while navigating Ryan's expanded role could get complicated quickly. There's also the question of Ryan's age. At 87, even the most energetic billionaire isn't going to be making 20-year strategic plans. The transition to his sons and their generation of leadership is probably only a few years away. Will the McCaskey family be comfortable with that transition? Will the Ryan heirs maintain the same Chicago-first stewardship approach that has characterized Patrick Sr.'s involvement? Then there's the fan factor. Bears fans are notoriously suspicious of change, especially change that involves wealthy outsiders gaining influence over their beloved teams. Ryan's 35-year involvement in Chicago credentials should help, but there will inevitably be concerns about outsiders taking control of Papa Bear's legacy. The path forward. So what happens next? Based on current reporting and industry analysis, here's the most likely scenario. Over the next 12 to 18 months, Patrick Ryan will gradually increase his ownership stake in the Chicago Bears through purchases from the McCaskey family members who need liquidity for estate taxes. This won't be a sudden takeover, it'll be a gradual transition that allows the family to maintain control while solving their financial challenges. Ryan will likely bring in additional investors, probably people with Chicago connections and NFL experience, to form what amounts to a new ownership consortium. This group will provide the capital and expertise needed for major initiatives like stadium development, while respecting the McCaskey family's role as principal owners. The operational changes will probably be subtle at first. Better facilities, upgraded technology, more sophisticated analytics capabilities, the kind of behind-the-scenes improvements that don't grab headlines but create the foundation for long-term success. The real test will come with the next major coaching or front office decision. Will the expanded ownership group push for more aggressive moves to compete for championships? Will they be willing to spend at the top of the NFL salary cap and invest in premium coaching talent? Those decisions will tell us whether this ownership transition translates into on-field success. The stadium situation will probably accelerate significantly. With Ryan's involvement, the Bears will have the financial credibility and political relationships needed to pursue the ambitious stadium project. Don't be surprised if we see major stadium announcements within the next 2 years. The secret king reveals himself. Patrick Ryan has been hiding in plain sight for 35 years. While fans focused on the McCaskey family drama and coaching changes, Ryan quietly built his influence and prepared for exactly this moment. He understood that patient capital and long-term relationships would eventually create the opportunity to help shape the franchise's future. Virginia McCaskey's death didn't create this opportunity, it revealed an opportunity that Ryan had been building toward for decades. His right of first refusal, board position, and deep Chicago roots positioned him perfectly to become the kind of partner the McCaskey family needed. The genius of Ryan's approach is that he never tried to force his way into control. Instead, he made himself indispensable by being the kind of owner every NFL family wishes they had as a partner. Wealthy enough to solve financial problems, experienced enough to provide strategic guidance, and committed enough to put the franchise's long-term success ahead of personal ego. Bears fans have spent decades wondering when their team would finally get the ownership structure needed to compete for championships. They might not have realized it, but the answer has been sitting in the boardroom all along, waiting for exactly this moment to step forward. Patrick Ryan isn't just becoming a bigger owner of the Chicago Bears, he's becoming the steward who could finally unlock the potential that Papa Bear built and Virginia McCaskey preserved. After 35 years of patience, the secret king of Chicago football is ready to reveal himself. And for Bears fans who have suffered through decades of mediocrity, this might be the most fetch news they've heard in a generation.